like something softened in me. And I remember feeling like, wow, they think Jesus is here right now, that he's actually here, his body and blood, or, however I was trying to wrap my head around that.
Yeah.
And I said, I think they're right.
Something that I struggled with in becoming an Orthodox Christian was realizing, like, I will never be a pastor. Was that something like you struggled with at all?
The role of a priest's wife, if I could boil it down, it feels very cringy, but it really is to be the support of the priest. Homeschooling is not school at home. It's really just living like at home, and then we learn things,
Like,
right?
How do you manage to do everything? Like, you're full-time mom, priest wife, you make content.
It's been my growing relationship with the Theotokos that has really transformed my view of women.
Great Lent is upon us.
Yes.
What is your mindset going into it, or like big ways you prepare, or maybe other things you fast from?
As like a pregnant, about to have a baby.
Oh my gosh.
Well,
yeah, exactly. That too. I interrupt our regular programming of the Occult to Orthodoxy series today to welcome a very honorable guest, Khouria Destinie. She is the wife of an Orthodox Christian priest, mother of 4, and creator of the Ascetic Life of Motherhood brand. She shares on the Patristic Nectar family channel on YouTube, as well as on social media, to help families incorporate Orthodox liturgical life into their homes, covering topics like homeschooling, fasting and feasting, and overall faith-based living. So I was going to address you as Khouria, but I just learned your name is actually Destinie, but Khouria is the priest's wife's title, and you said Aramaic?
In Arabic.
Arabic.
Yeah.
Okay.
Arabic,
Okay.
yeah. So I go to an Antiochian church. My husband's an Antiochian priest. And so the Antiochian tradition, they go by Khouria, or sometimes I hear people refer to me as Khori, with just like an I at the end. So that's the title. Instead of presbytera, matushka, Khouria. Yeah.
Okay. So I'm so glad to know that. Okay.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you for teaching me that. I'm new here. Maybe the listeners already know, but I'm just so excited to have you here. I didn't know, well, of course I should have expected. My listeners were so excited to have you as well. I shared that I was going to be having you as a guest, and so they gave me a whole bunch of questions. So we'll see just how many we can get through. But the first one that most people want to know, and I don't know if you've done many podcasts, or I'm sure you've shared your background on YouTube, but can you tell us just a little bit about your family's journey into the Orthodox faith?
Yes, thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here. So I haven't shared it on YouTube. I've shared it on my stories previously, so I'm sure people are curious. But my husband and I are high school sweethearts. We met in high school, and we started attending after high school a Protestant Christian university. And so that is where we first encountered Orthodox Christians, was at our university. My husband was studying biblical and theological studies at the time. I was getting my degree in elementary education. Orthodoxy was not on our radar at all. But in his Great Books program, so he was in a program that was like kind of like the honors program in the university. They started reading, all the way from like Homer to modern day philosophers, just a lot of great books. And in that, you are exposed to the early church fathers. And so when you're reading the early church fathers, there's obviously a lot of questions, a lot of just curiosities about church history. Even though he was getting his degree in biblical and theological studies, church history is a very anemic part of the education in a Protestant university. And so he was sort of wrestling with these things. I remember he would debate people. We had other friends who were ortho-curious at the time, or even converting to Orthodoxy. And he was just like, what is this? And so he ended up taking a Orthodox theology class that was taught by a professor who was not Orthodox at all. In fact, he was not sympathetic to Orthodoxy. He did not like Orthodoxy. He was a missionary to Russia. And so he had a lot of opinions about the Orthodox Church there and was really seeking to convert Orthodox Christians to Protestant Christianity. So it's kind of an interesting dynamic. But the best part of that class was he required them to go to an Orthodox church and visit. Now, I'm sharing kind of his part of the story. I know nothing. I'm just carrying on with, my life and my degree. And so he says, "Oh, so for my assignment, I have to go to this Orthodox church for a Sunday." And I'm like, "Cool. Well, that's fine. Let's go." Does not prepare me at all. I have no clue. I've heard of Orthodox Jews. I've never heard of an Orthodox Christian. So to
Same,
me,
yeah.
yeah,
Before.
I didn't know, like, I just assumed it was just like a church like I've always gone to. My background was a mega church. Like I grew up, my most formative years were in a mega church. And so when my husband and I met, I started attending his like smaller non-denominational church. So I didn't have a ton of exposure to anything liturgical or anything high church. So we go that Sunday, and it's a Western Rite Orthodox church is the closest one to us. So we go, and I am like shocked, kind of scared, really uncomfortable, looking at like, what are all these painted? Like I was just like, this is not church. And so the whole thing was a very uncomfortable experience for me. I remember thinking, I've been a Christian my whole life. Nothing about this feels familiar. Therefore, my conclusion in my heart at the time was this must be wrong because I don't even know what to do with that.
Yeah.
So we met the parishioners afterwards. They encouraged us to stay for coffee hour, which I tell people always stay for coffee hour. It's an essential part of the Orthodox Church. And so we stayed, and they were so kind. And I was like, and they're normal. Like that was what I was expecting, was like, they must be like weird people. No, they were totally normal,
Yeah.
very welcoming, very kind. So I remember we walked back to the car, and I'm just like baffled. Like, I'm like, that was so crazy. That was so weird. Like we'll check that off. Like, we're never going to come back. And my husband's reaction was not that adamant. He was like, I don't know. I thought it was really interesting. And it didn't like turn him off. And so I was like, okay, well, that was all I needed. That was the only exposure I was going to ever need to make a decision. And so that started, I would say, a 5-year process before our conversion. That was our first step in. And a lot happened in between. I mean, this is 5 years of conversations and wrestling with things. We ended up graduating college. My husband took a position as a youth pastor at a small little church. And so we continued there. We were faithful. But that is where I would say things really started to crumble for us. We were starting to, I guess, ask ourselves like some bigger questions, like, what if apostolic succession is a real thing? Like, obviously, the Catholics and the Orthodox claim that it is. And so if that were the case, then what? That was a big question mark.
Mm.
And there was talk of possibly ordaining my husband. And my husband is a very faithful man. And he says, look, if they ordain me, I'm never leaving. Like, it's like I'm here and this is where I'm going to be. And so I think he had to start to wrestle with a lot of questions about that, of like, what would that mean? Is this where we're going to be forever? His dad is a pastor, and he grew up in this church. And so even in the time that he was attending, things had already started to shift. They were wrestling with really difficult questions, cultural pressures and things that were coming on the church. Things have already developed as far as practice. And so I remember us talking about, the church that we're going to be raising our kids in, is that going to be the same church that we're in right now? Are we handing the faith to them? It's going to be the same. What
Yeah.
about our grandkids? What about the future generations? And so that's where, like, I started to sort of think, like, yeah, that's a good point. It's already changed in our lifetime, which has been very short. So maybe we
Wow.
should consider that. So when he was teaching the youth, I remember there was a number of things that he was wrestling with personally that were shifting, changing his beliefs. And I remember him saying, like, I don't know that I can continue teaching these things to the youth because I don't want to teach something contrary to what this church believes, but
Yeah.
I also don't want to teach something that's contrary to what I believe. And so he kind of found himself a little stuck. And so we discerned that at that point he should step down from the position, just for his own integrity and seek what the next step will be for us. And that was a really hard decision. That was incredibly hard. We got together and our vision for our lives together was really the foundation of that was ministry. That's what we thought we were doing. And so stepping away and pausing that felt at the time like we were pausing on our calling or
Mm,
maybe even denying that calling.
yeah.
Um, it was very heavy-hearted, and so he ended up stepping down and working on getting a job, that didn't require him to go back to school, that could make enough money to pay off all of our student loans. That was a big goal of ours, and so he got a job in law enforcement, which
Hmm.
was a completely different field, and I wasn't entirely happy about it. I remember
Yeah.
even saying, "I married you as a pastor, like, I didn't wanna be a police wife," like, that's not what I imagined. And so, anyway, I
Yeah.
laugh now, but I knew back then God doesn't waste anything, and that took us about 1 year between him stepping down, and we started to attend different churches. It was not orthodoxy. It was, "Okay, let's sort of check out the landscape. Let's see what's out there." Again, he had been raised in his church denomination for his whole life, which is the Church of God.
Oh,
Um, and so let's see what else is there. So we started attending all the local churches in our area. We went to a Presbyterian church, a Methodist church, a Baptist church, a Catholic church, every kind of church that was around us. And I would describe that as church shopping. It felt like we were church shopping. And it felt yucky. I didn't like it at all. It felt like we were showing up and evaluating them and just being
yeah.
like, "Do you have what I need?" Or,
Yeah.
it just felt yucky. And so anyway, we just continued on. We were always church going people, so every Sunday we were going to church. So I know this is getting long, but
No, I love it.
um
I'm getting so much
okay.
from this story and
Okay.
I'm relating so much. Yeah.
Okay. Good.
Yes, keep
Good.
going.
So, one weekend we traveled to the mountains. My grandma has a cabin out there. And so my husband was like looking for churches in the area and he's like, "Oh, there's an Orthodox church just down the hill. We should check it out." And so we've been to all the other churches I mentioned, but we had not gone to an Orthodox church again because we had already sort of been to an Orthodox church. And so I was like, yeah, like although like in my heart I was pretty closed off from it.
Yeah.
He was very open with any of my suggestions, and like my husband is not a pushy, controlling person. He's just very patient. And so I was like, "What about this?" He'd be like, "Sure." And then he would say, "What about this?" I'd say, "Sure." So we were really cooperating. We were trying to study and learn. And so I say, "Yeah, let's go check it out." This is the embarrassing part of the story. So every time we go to a church, I'd always wear church clothes. Even though we were in Southern California, the church culture is very casual. People
Yeah.
wear, whatever. I knew when you go to another church, you should at least dress up a little bit. However, we were traveling. I had not thought to pack church clothes or anything. We both did it. And so when it came time to church, I'm like looking and I'm like, well, I have some ripped jeans and a casual like
Mm,
Hollister shirt. Okay. Like it was
yeah.
very California, like 2010s. And anyway, it flip flops, rainbow flip flops. So anyway, I remember thinking, well, God wouldn't want us to like not go because we were dressed poorly. So let's just go. It's a little bit embarrassing, but I honestly didn't think much of it until much later. So
Yeah.
we show up to this church and it is packed. It's a beautiful Greek church in San Bernardino County, and it's packed out, and everyone's dressed up really formally. Like
It's a
they got
Greek
their
church,
hair
right?
down. Greek church. Come to find out, it's Palm Sunday. Didn't know.
Oh.
Yes, which If you're familiar with Greek parishes, and oftentimes Antiochian parishes, ironically, Palm Sunday is like the most attended day, sometimes more than Pascha. It's just everybody shows up on Palm Sunday.
Wow.
It looks like some of them had their hair done from the salon that morning. So anyway, they were very fancy. We are not. So we go and we sit there, and it's a completely different experience for me. I remember just thinking, like, wow, this is so beautiful. The choir, it sounded like they were like literal angels back there. And I couldn't see them. They were on a loft. And we were looking around at all the icons, and my husband studied Greek in college, and so he's reading in the icons what each of them are, and they're all the apostles next to us. And I was like, oh, wow, that's so cool. And so we're just kind of like soaking it in. But again, my heart had felt very different in this liturgy. And so afterwards, the priest comes right up to us and said, so he singles us out and walks up to us and says, "Hi, welcome." Because again, I've described we are sticking out like a sore thumb. And so he asks us a couple of questions. How do we get here? And they're all very welcoming. So apparently they had this banquet prepared, a fundraising event for their parish hall that they're trying to build. And so we were super broke back then, and we're like, we'll just dip out. Like, we can't pay anything. So we kind of tried to sneak out, and a number of people stopped us. And they were like, no, 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 come. We paid for you, please.
Oh my
And we were
God.
like, oh, that's so nice. Thank you. So we go in, and somebody else comes up to us and like, oh, we already paid for your ticket. And I'm thinking, oh, I think somebody already did. They were just like so welcoming and kind and hospitable. So we stayed. Had no idea it was Lenten. I mean, it was Palm Sunday, so they had fish and everything. It was incredible. Got to talk to the priest. And again, something in me shifted then. I thought, wow, wish we lived closer to here. This was really lovely. And I would definitely come back. I was more curious at that point. Um, and
Wow.
so we put that on a shelf and continued on our journey. We started attending an Anglican church. It was called an Anglo-Catholic church. So although they're not in communion with the Catholic Church, they are high church Anglicans. And so I found myself really comfortable there. Surprisingly, something had shifted. And so we started attending the catechism there and learning more and talking with the priest. It's a very similar parish to what we have now, which is, a lot of young families, a lot of like post-college. I knew friends from college that were there. And so I found myself feeling a little comfortable. It was a good kind of bridge for me at that point. But there were still a lot of questions. We were still learning about Orthodoxy and comparing the two. Um, Funny enough, we had narrowed it down to Orthodox and Anglican, which makes me kind of smile now. But Catholicism was taken off the table very early on for us. Um, Mostly just because we visited and we went to a traditional Latin wedding. I got to see a lot of these things, but there was something about it that just it wasn't right. So it was like good on
Oh.
paper, but in person, it was very Protestant. That's how we both felt, just like very
Oh.
Protestant. Not the traditional Latin mass, but there was
Yeah.
something about it that just didn't sit well, and so we didn't even consider it again. So
Yeah.
Anglican and Orthodox. So we were comparing the two and wrestling with it. At one point, the Anglican priest wasn't sufficiently answering a lot of our questions. It felt like everything was very like wishy-washy, like, you can or you can't. We don't really take a hard stance on these things. Whereas we were seeing the Orthodox Church was just much more clear on how those
Yeah.
matters were taught. And so he says to us, I think you guys are going to find yourself a lot happier at the Orthodox Church.
Really? He said that.
He told us that. And so we were like, well, that's interesting. So we found an Orthodox church that some friends of ours went to. And although we were not attending liturgy there, we found there was a catechism. So we're like, well, go to the catechism. So we were being very good Protestants. We were going to the catechism at the Anglican church, skipping liturgy and going to catechism there because we were trying to learn, which is embarrassing to me now, but that's what we were figuring out. And so I asked the priest there at the Orthodox Church a question. He was describing liturgy, and I said, "Could you explain more about that? I'm a little confused." And he kind of cracks a smile, and he's like, it's one of those things you just have to experience it to know what I'm talking about. You just kind of have to see it. And I was like, that seems reasonable. Yeah, you're right. Okay. So I tell my husband we should just skip that catechism this week
Mm-hmm.
and just go to the liturgy at the Anglican Church and then go to the liturgy at the Divine Liturgy at the Orthodox Church. And he's like, all right, let's do it. So we go. Now, this has been about a year since that last Orthodox Church visit
Okay.
at the Greek parish. And so we show up, and I'm very uncomfortable. I describe myself as very sweaty and just still uncomfortable, but there was something very different about this liturgy. It was, um, I think, the turning point in my heart. Like, I'm gonna get like emotional, but um, like something softened in me, and I remember feeling like, wow, I think they actually believe that Christ is here. Like the reverence, how everything was oriented, how the liturgy, the great entrance, people were like prostrating. It was it was one of those moments where I thought, like, they think Jesus is here right now, that he's actually here, his body and blood, or however I was trying to wrap my head around that.
Yeah.
And I said, I think they're right. I think that this is right. Like, I think he's here. And I didn't have the words to really, but it struck my heart. And I was like, I don't think we can go back. I don't think that there's like, and so this is where my husband describes it as where I kind of jumped ahead of him because
Mm,
um, he wasn't fully there. He obviously was like dealing with it sort of in a theological sense, and he's very careful and but for me, I knew in my heart, like, this is it. I've seen it all. I've been there all the other places I've been learning, and I think this is it. And I'm scared. I don't understand it all. There's certain things that are still very uncomfortable.
yeah.
Icons, the Virgin Mary. I don't know what to do. The saints, intercessions. I don't know what to do with any of this. But I think Christ is here. And that was it. That was our journey into Orthodoxy. We were attending weekly. We went through the catechism, and then we were received together on Holy or on Lazarus Saturday of 2012. And I've never been to another church since. It's just the Orthodox Church from then on out. Joining the church, although it was a very joyful, wonderful thing, it still felt. Um, there's a passage of Christ talking to the young rich ruler where he says, I've done all these things, now what do I do? And he says, sell everything you have and follow me. And there's something about that passage that really speaks to my heart because it felt like we were giving up everything.
Yeah.
uh, And not in a bad way. It's just that all the things I thought we were doing had to kind of die, and we were leaving our family.
Yeah.
We were leaving our family behind. They're all still in those churches, and they
Oh,
didn't quite understand either. And so we were just kind of quietly, faithfully following Christ. And I'm
wow.
so pregnant right now. So,
No, it's beautiful. I've loved
but
listening to your story so much, and it's interesting. I had my friend on who's also an Orthodox convert, and that was the same moment that captured her heart for the Orthodox
yeah,
Church is being in divine liturgy and
yeah,
realizing all these people really believe Christ is here. So she said those like same words, which is just
yeah,
incredible. Um, and
yeah.
are your family, are they Orthodox now?
No,
No, okay.
no. So I think part of what makes me emotional too is that we only could see this far ahead. So although it felt like we were leaving everything, 5 years later, my husband was called to the priesthood, and this is our life now. And so I think part of it is that feeling of like, if I just trusted, if I just could see
Yeah,
that Christ was leading us, it would be okay. But no, our families are not. They're still all Protestant, but they're very supportive. Um,
yeah,
we There was some tension, of course, early on, but again, they're very, very supportive. I don't want to paint it negatively. I think some people do have a harder time, but our parents and families know that we love Christ, and that was the most important thing about us, and that was what we were doing. So,
Yeah.
although they couldn't fully see it now, when they come in to visit, they go to the church with us, they see the beauty in it. I remember my in-laws in particular, who my father-in-law I mentioned is a pastor. They've always been very supportive of their son. And so when he went into law enforcement, that was hard for them
Mhm.
because they said, we've always known you had a calling. Um, and it felt like that he denied that. But when we told them that we would be going to seminary, they were in tears and they said, this is what you should be doing. This
Wow.
is right. So they were very supportive and they have been ever since. Um, so I mean, but that's everybody has their own journey.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, we're still the only Orthodox Christians in our family besides our kids. So
Okay.
yeah,
It's so interesting too, like your story, how you're saying, if only you could see back then where God was leading you, because it's so much easier to see in retrospect. Because I remember like going through very similar emotions in my conversion process. And I went to a mega church and we were serving with students, and they actually asked us to stop serving with students because we had started going to divine liturgy, and our we were starting to get that
yeah,
Orthodox chronema. And
oh,
and so I remember that time, and I was pregnant and I was very emotional at that time. And, I wanted to do what was best for my family as well. Like,
yeah,
when you start having
yeah,
babies, you really think about this, like, where
yeah,
are we gonna root their faith in? How are they like, what's gonna be best for growing a family in the faith? So
yeah,
all of those decisions are, like, the biggest deal, especially when you're pregnant and you're trying to figure that
yeah,
out or you're planning for your family. I even think that with, like, people who aren't believers in God, like, a lot of people become believers once they become parents
yeah,
because you want what's best for your kids
yeah,
ultimately. This episode is brought to you by our YouTube membership. Thank you guys so much who have chosen to join and support me and support the work we're doing here on the channel. This is a place where I probably share TMI, my behind the scenes of learning to live a raised and redeemed life and heal from my past life of sin, where I answer member questions directly, sometimes in personalized videos, and give priority attention to all member comments. Again, thank you for joining and supporting the work we do here. God bless you. So yeah, I related a lot to your
yeah,
journey. And then okay, well, I wanna
yeah,
know a little bit about
yeah.
now being a Korea. Like,
Mhm.
what does that I guess, like, if you always knew your life was gonna be in ministry, something that I struggled with in becoming an Orthodox Christian was realizing, like, I will never be a pastor. That will never be my
Mm,
role. Was that something, like, you struggled with at all, in becoming Orthodox? And then how did you find purpose in being a priest's wife?
sure. Yeah, I think it's interesting. I wasn't raised in the tradition of having female pastors. That was never something that I was even considered.
Yeah.
But as a young child, before I met my husband, I felt very called in my own way to do missions. That was something that I was very interested in, and felt as if God was calling me to follow Him and go somewhere. And so, one of the things that drew my husband and I together was I was 15 when I met him, and he was 16. He said he wanted to be a pastor, and I remember thinking, well, that could work if I was going to be a missionary. I could use a pastor. And so when we were in college, we were actively considering missions work. And the irony is what stopped us from missions after graduation was just our immense student loan debts.
Mhm.
And so that became our goal. And it actually coincided with our conversion to Orthodoxy, is paying off our student loans shortly after we became Orthodox and becoming debt free. But that stopped us initially from going to do missions. That was something we were interested in. And so, in many ways, my life now is what I felt that desire, even as a young child, to just serve the church, serve Christ, whatever that looked like.
Yeah.
Feels very compatible with that. But I definitely didn't wrestle with the role of that. I knew as a teenager that this is the man I'm going to spend my life with, as crazy as that is to say. And so wherever he was, it's like that's what we were going to be doing.
Yeah.
So it feels very, very much a continuum, even though I didn't see. it through that.
Yeah.
Um, it feels like in many ways I was called to this life as well. And I don't think that necessarily every priest's wife has that story. But I knew very confidently when my husband was discerning the priesthood, I knew he should do that. But when you become Orthodox Christians, it's not necessarily like, oh, well, I always knew I wanted to be a pastor, so now I'll just do that here. It's a really different thing, and it's a very fearful thing. And it needs to be discerned with a lot of wisdom. And so it's not straightforward either. You know, that took us 5 years after we became Orthodox to even have that conversation, even though in the back of my mind, I was always hoping it wasn't an active conversation during those times. We were really just feeling like infants in the faith and just trying to learn and be faithful as much as we can during those 5 years. And that's when he was called to pursue the priesthood. So
Yeah, yeah, I get that. I feel like an infant right now. I mean, maybe I've heard a lot of like even priests I've had on my show be like, I'm still an infant. So,
I'm still an infant. I've been Orthodox for 13 years, and I still learn things all the time.
yeah.
It's the nature of our faith. It's not just like something we arrive at or we master. It is this ancient well that we're just continually seeking the depths of.
Yeah, that's a beautiful way to put it.
Mm.
So, can I ask, like, what are sort of the responsibilities of a priest's wife? Like, what is expected of you? Maybe, like, I know that there's something you have to sign when your husband does go into the
Mm.
priesthood, and then what is expected of you,
Yeah.
like, now?
So I think the basics before you get to that point where your husband is ordained, that maybe people don't know is they will not send a married couple to seminary if the wife is not on board. And so, in many ways, she holds those keys of like, hey, I'm not about this life. I'm not into it. You can't do this without me.
Right.
And so, part of the discerning process is also it's for the couple together to make this decision because we typically, um, so you're not going to be ordained until after you're married, unless you are deciding to be a celibate priest. They will ordain you, but they wait till much later. They want to really make sure you know
Mm.
that's not what you want. So the bishop will interview both of us, and he will make sure that it's very clear that this is what you were as well, and that you
Right.
see it for him. So it is very much an us decision. Um, and so that's, I would say, the role of a priest's wife, if I could boil it down, it feels very cringy, but if I boil it down, it really is to be the support of the priest. Um, and that's a very similar role as a wife. But when you, when my husband was ordained, it was an incredible day. It felt like a wedding. I mean, it was just incredible. But as I watched him, I remember feeling like it was a wedding and he was marrying the church, and I was going to share him with the church.
Wow.
And it was a very, very spiritual experience for me. Like, although I did not receive the grace of ordination, there is a special grace that it was just put on all of us that day. And so it was amazing to see him become the man that I knew that God was calling him to be. And then now I get to stand and support him in that role. And so I think that the life of a priest will look incredibly different in any parish. It will not look like my role or any other role. We support the priest, and it's one of those things that, you know, it comes with a lot of challenges. Your family is sort of a public image now, right? So
Yeah.
people will see you. Your kids obviously now, like, maybe may be more visible because they're the priest kids or whatever it is. So it comes with those things. But my husband was ordained in 2019, and I can think of like, if we compare the challenges versus the blessings just overflow far beyond the challenges.
Yeah.
Because I think every couple, every family, every job, they have challenges, of course. But our job as and this isn't the case also for every priest's wife or every priest family, but our job is to just live the Christian life. My husband is a full-time paid priest, and so that is his job. He serves the church. He doesn't have to have a secular job. And I also get to stay home with my kids. And so our job is to live the Christian life and be faithful and serve the community. And God always provides, even in the ways that I joke that all of our needs are provided, but also He gives us all of our wants. It just feels like we get spoiled all the time.
Right.
We have a very wonderful parish. As we're in this interview right now, I have a parishioner who just brought me a bunch of food from Costco to stock my fridge.
Wow.
It's just the kind of things that it blows my mind, all the blessings that God gives us. And so in many ways, it feels like we pour our lives out to the parish and subsequently they take care of us and they pour their lives back into us.
Wow.
So we really support each other. But as far as the role of a priest's wife, it's to support my husband and make sure that he's okay, that he's taken care of. Today he has like a 12-hour day schedule. And so I'll usually check in with him, make sure he has eaten food. If he hasn't, I'll bring him food. It depends on his schedule. It changes a lot because it's the nature of dealing with people. So I have to make sure that, he's okay. And
Yeah.
then our family, making sure our family is cared for. And then beyond that, every person as a lay person has their gifts and talents and strengths that God has given us. And so we use those to serve the church, and that changes in different seasons. And so whatever your gifts are, God will want you to be a good steward of those things. So you serve in whatever capacity you're able to. So
Mm-hmm.
that's sort of how I frame it. So my own unique strengths and skills are used to serve the parish, but that's the same as I was doing before he was a priest. I was doing very similar things that I was good at and I love to serve in those ways. And then with more kids, maybe you dial it down a little bit, and when you have a
Yep.
different season, you dial it up a little bit. So that's kind of how
Yeah.
I share it.
That's beautiful. I think all of us wives can take something from that as well, even if we're not married to a priest, like supporting
Yeah.
our husband. I'm curious, like, how do you guys handle conflict? And
Mm,
if that's weird at all, because like would he be, you wouldn't confess to him with your
right.
confession, right? So like, how do you guys
Right.
handle those sort of things?
You mean conflict meaning our own conflicts between us or
Yeah,
parish
like
conflicts?
how do you guys approach marital conflicts? Because
Mm,
like, is it weird that he's a priest? Like, I don't know if that question makes sense at
yeah.
all.
Yeah. I think what you're getting at is like, okay, he's a priest, he's also my husband.
Yes,
And like we're also people.
you're
We're a real
also
couple.
humans. Yes.
Yeah. I think I would say we're just like everybody else in that way. Um, we have our marriage that we have to work through issues as they come up. We've been married now for 18 years, so there's been plenty of opportunities for different challenges. But what I find is the same for us. We have to communicate well and keep that dialogue going and just make sure that we're always thinking the best of that person when we're dealing with these conflicts. It's very easy to demonize somebody or resent them or hear something they didn't say and be offended. And so um, I would say we work really hard on our marriage to make sure that we are connected, make sure that we are speaking to each other every single day. We have kind of like after the kids go to bed, we have like a decompressing time where we just
Mm.
sort of check in about our day. Um, and just, is there anything heavy on your heart? I ask questions like I'll say like, hey, like, was there something that, encouraged you today or whatever it is?
Yeah.
We also have once a week established a date night at home. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's sort of our like, we call it Sunday fun day, but on Sunday nights we'll have a fire and a chat and we'll just sit there and listen to music and have a special drink or whatever it is. And I cherish those times. They're some of the most fun times that we have just at home in their backyard. And
Yep.
We have a number of people that babysit for us, so maybe about once a month we go out of the house, and so it's that making sure your marriage is also a priority when you're in the season of having kids. It can be challenging to sort of reach the other person and make sure that you're connecting. I found that with more kids, it just makes us more intentional in
Yeah.
how we spend our time. And even, if he's home in the mornings, like I'll delay starting homeschooling to like have coffee with him and hear, hey, what's your day looking like? Or he'll tell me some story that he wants to share. And our kids will also see that we're spending time. Hey, don't interrupt. We're talking to daddy. We're having our little coffee
Mhm.
together. So just things like that to sort of just show that it's important that we need the time to
Yeah.
talk and get to hear from each other. He really is somebody that I look forward to spending time with every single day. And when there's times where it's very busy seasons, I really miss him. I miss him. I want to know what's going on.
Aw.
Um, and so it's very good. But yeah, I do not go to confession with my husband. I don't think that would be typical.
Right.
Um, we go to another priest, which thankfully I have many priests in the area. But my kids and I will go to a local priest
Okay.
for our confessions, and he goes to the same priest as well. So it's
Okay.
helpful. Yeah,
Interesting. Yeah,
yeah,
I didn't know any of those things, like how that would work in a family.
yeah,
So thank you for
yeah,
that. And I love everything you said about prioritizing your marriage and your husband and even having those boundaries with your kids, like, hey, spending time with dad right now.
yeah.
If you are interested, this is your last opportunity to sign up for the Young Aspiring Chanters Retreat. This is a 3-day retreat happening in Boca Raton, Florida at St. Mark Greek Orthodox Church, where you get to learn the sacred art of Byzantine chant. Whether you aspire to be on the chant stand or better participate from within divine liturgy, this is the retreat for you. For just $100, you get 3 days worth of workshops in the Byzantine chants, participation in all church services, course materials and hymn recordings, professional group and solo photos, a certificate of participation. Oh, and meals throughout the weekend are included too. Sign up at thechantstand.org before time runs out. We'll see you this weekend. So let's kind of jump into the mother life, the homeschooling. I know our listeners would like to hear a little bit about that. Would you just tell us like what a typical day in your life looks like being a
Sure.
homeschool mom?
Yeah. I mean, it's changed so much. So tell you what it is right now. So my kids are 9, 7, 5, almost 5, and 2, and
Okay.
I'm about to have another baby right now. And so um, it's it's a really beautiful life. I like to frame it as homeschooling is not school at home. It's really just living like at home, and then we learn things, right? So
Yeah.
it's I don't like to think if you imagine a school day and then you try to impose that in your home, it's going to be difficult.
Yeah.
Um, so I like to think of it more as like this is just life. We're here together,
Like
and
the
we're
old
learning
days,
about life. Yeah,
like Little
yeah,
House on the
absolutely,
Prairie days.
absolutely. And I don't devalue that we have to learn math and reading and writing and all those things. Of course, those are important.
Yeah.
So the way that I orient our homeschooling is prioritizing like peace in our home is really the
Yeah.
number one thing. There's times where it's like, man, we're all like bickering and just feeling like it's just it's really hard. And it's like when that happens, like, all right, we gotta pivot. We gotta do something else. So typically what it is, my kids will wake up um when they wake up. We don't have like structured time to wake up. I'm a firm believer in everybody getting the best sleep in the house that they can. So when we wake up, we go downstairs, we make breakfast together. It's definitely a family event to get breakfast on the table. And I do very standard food. I'm not like a gourmet chef. So we pretty much eat the same things every day. We have like waffle Wednesday and Saturday pancakes, but something like that. But for the most part, they eat the same things. And then so we gather on the table, we pray before our food, we eat. We chat. Sometimes I'll read a chapter of a book or we'll read our saint story. It just depends.
Mm-hmm.
And then we will all work together to clean up the table and do our chores. So everybody has a job, even the 2-year-old has a job. So we all work together to clean the kitchen. We close down the kitchen. I will send my kids up to get ready for the day. I'm a firm believer in, not just kind of like lazily getting about things. Like I think getting ready for the day is an important start for us.
Yeah.
And so as I'm kind of finishing up laundry, I do a load of laundry. I do the load of dishes and a load of laundry, and then I go get myself ready. My kids are getting themselves ready, which includes making their bed, tidying up their rooms, brushing their teeth, brushing their hair. I say this every single day of my life. You would think they knew what to do, but I still have to repeat it every single day. Did you do this? Did you do that? They have a little
Yeah.
checklist too. And so they do that. They come down, they get ready. And if I'm not quite ready, they start their independent work at that point. So they already have sort of their flow of things they have to get done on their own throughout the day. And so if they get a head start, then now they're a little bit ahead of the game. And so once everybody's ready, I get my 2-year-old ready. We all gather around the prayer corner and we start with prayer. And this is me and the kids. Typically, my husband has already left and he does his prayers on his own. And so we do our prayers and then we go gather around the table. And now this is the part that sometimes has a variable. So we will do a saint story at the beginning if we haven't already, or we'll read a Bible story, which is what we're doing right now. We're reading a little bit longer versions of the scriptures. I've done different Bibles. Right now we're using the Golden Bible, and so it's about 3 pages per story, and so it's just a
Oh.
little bit more engagement. So my kids this is a Protestant, Bible, children's Bible.
Okay, the Golden Bible.
Um, the Golden, it's an older one. So yeah, I find that it's pretty closely tied to what the actual scriptures say. So we go with that one. And so we read the story. My kids will have some kind of like activity they can grab easily in a bin. So it's like coloring or drawing or whatever it is while they're listening. We have a brief discussion about the scriptures. Today was really beautiful. We did the Tower of Babel, and my daughter was misremembering something. She said, when we heard the story, she was like, "Yeah, but remember the flames came down, And I was like, "The flames? I don't remember that part of the story." And I said, "Oh, you're thinking of Pentecost," because
Um,
she made the connection with the language. That just brought up a beautiful discussion about how God confused the language, but yet God actually illuminated the language at Pentecost, so people understood languages they didn't even know. So
yeah.
anyway, there was a really cool discussion that we had, and that's with everybody at the table. And
Even the
then
2-year-old.
2-year-old's there coloring, just kind of
Okay.
listening along. Yeah,
Yeah.
he's that's a nice thing about big families is that the little ones they don't know they're little. They're with you and they just want to be there. And so right now I've paused because I'm going to have a baby right now, but we typically then transition to a family lesson. So I purposely choose curriculum, and I think that was one of the questions too, was um, that you mentioned beforehand about like, do I use curriculum? Yes, I use
Yeah.
curriculum for everything. Except for the Orthodox material and the Bible material, I do come up with that on my own. But I've been doing that for years. And so one day I'll have it written down for everybody and I'll be able
Yeah.
to produce that, but it's just not my season. So we use curriculum that's generally for everybody in the family to engage in. So we choose different units and we study them and we go all out. And it's one of our favorite parts of the day. So we gather around the table, we stay at the table for about an hour. Then the smaller boys after that lesson, the family lesson, I do recess. My kids love this. You use school language and it just feels so fun. Okay, so now you have 30 minutes. They have to go out to play, and this is rain, snow, sunshine. It does not matter. You just get your equipment on and you go outside for 30 minutes. And
Mm.
that gives me a little bit of a reset. We clear the table. I'll like sit down with like coffee if I have a chance. I'll read my little devotional and maybe even write something in my journal, just kind of just decompress for me. Because as I've described, I kind of wake up and go.
Yeah.
And so that's just the nature of having a lot of kids who are just very hungry when they wake up. And so like
Yeah.
this is my pause.
Yeah.
And then I bring them back in. A lot of times I'll have my boys just stay outside. We have a closed in backyard. And so they'll stay outside. I'll pull the girls in, my older two, and that's when we'll start doing one-on-one lessons. So they're still at an age where I have to guide them through a few lessons.
Mhm.
And so we'll do one-on-one lessons. We kind of switch off between their math and their language arts or reading assignments. And then I'll let them finish their work in between. They have independent work and they have a little checklist. And so for the most part, our school day is about 2.5 hours long.
Okay.
And it can go longer, of course, depending on how engaged we are. But we try to get it done before lunchtime. When they come back in, by the way, I give them a little snack too. That's another thing.
Yeah.
Snacks are key. And so we get the curriculum done that we've set out to do, and then we have the rest of the day to do whatever it is. There's times where we're just really into whatever it is, and it's 5 p.m. and we're still going, because we're just really involved in it, or we took a break and we came back to it. So,
Yeah.
but for the most part, we do our appointments and things in the afternoons, so that we can get the bulk of our schoolwork done. And I try to stay focused during those times, not doing other housework or
Yeah.
checking messages or checking my phone in general. I just leave it plugged in another room. And so that helps me stay focused on the
Yeah.
task. And again, there are some days where it's like, okay, we're going to the museum today, and then we'll have to do some of those things later. So there are exceptions. It's a lot of beauty in these things. When a great feast comes around, there's 12 of those. We actually take the whole day off. That's a school day off for us, and so I love doing that. So that is what gives me the opportunity to do sort of the feast day stuff that I really care about doing, because I want our lives to be oriented on the life of the church.
Yeah.
And so, as much as we can do that, we pause when it's, the entrance of the Theotokos. We learn about that. We get to have decorate our table. We're going to go to the liturgy. We're going to bring, some food for that. So I try to make it as much a part of our life that our life at home in the church is just as much connected to what, when we go to church, that there's
Yeah.
a cohesion.
I love that. So, did you say what curriculum you do use for
No,
them?
I didn't mention it. So I use different ones.
Okay.
So you mean for the feast day content or
No,
for,
I guess
oh,
for school, like, I'm curious, like, what an Orthodox Christian mom would choose.
sure, sure. Yeah, I think so. Going back a little bit, I was a public school kid. And so was trained in college to be a public school teacher. That's what I have my degree in. I have a master's and a bachelor's in
Wow.
teaching elementary education. And so what's really interesting though is I didn't learn about a lot of different philosophies of education in that formation. And so when I was pregnant with my oldest, I was feeling this conviction to homeschool. Even though I didn't want to, if I was being honest. I really didn't want to. I really imagined myself more as a supportive role to the teachers. And I wanted to be really involved, but I knew the Lord was calling me to this. So I spent those first few years of being a mom, a new mom, of learning about the different options out there. Just like what you said, what is an Orthodox mom like? What is she teaching? So what that looked like for me was talking to other Orthodox moms, asking them, they like, what do you do? What kind of curriculum do you use? And a lot of them were pointing me to classical education and Charlotte Mason philosophy. I got really into Montessori when my daughter was young. That was really appealing to me.
Mhm.
And so it just kind of became a process of learning. When my daughter first started school, when she was about kindergarten age, I guess you could say, I jumped into classical conversations, and I quickly found that wasn't for me. So I hesitate almost to say, like, oh, this is what an Orthodox Christian does, because it's so dependent on you as a mom. And it's
Mm.
hard to say, oh, this would work for you, because it doesn't always work for that person. So I think part of the challenge in homeschooling is just finding what works for you and what aligns with your vision of education. And what I kept coming back to was Charlotte Mason. Charlotte Mason really aligned well with my view of children, how we wanted to orient our homes. It's very much, I don't know if I could do it justice, but Charlotte Mason is very much family oriented,
Mm-hmm.
multiple ages taught together, more outside time, like pretty much a majority of your day for children is outside,
Mm.
exploring nature and God's creation through that. And it's a very strong foundation. And so that's sort of where I've leaned, is more Charlotte Mason. And I'm
Okay.
becoming more and more. But I do still, so the like math and language arts that we use is the good and the beautiful. I find that it's a good balance. It feels like it's very similar to what you might find in a public school, I guess. Like so it has um, just the typical math, but it's very engaging and sweet and my kids love it. So I just stick with that. But then for any of the other subjects, I lean more towards Charlotte Mason, which is, I guess I'll summarize it as immersing them in all that is good, all that is beautiful, like the best of everything. You don't need to
Mm-hmm.
show them everything, just show them the best, you know? So,
Okay.
like, beautiful picture books and beautiful music and beautiful art and contemplation, asking good questions, having good discussions, being the sort of the guide, but not also dominating. This is the right answer, you know. It's really trying to form the whole person of who they are, and the emphasis is our Christian life and our on virtue and those kinds of qualities, and being a critical thinker and
Mhm.
somebody who's yeah, again, I like that better, thinking about it than, there is no right answer. When we were talking about the Bible, I was like, I don't know the answer. I would like to hear what you guys think or what stood out to you, because
Yeah.
I think sometimes I can get focused on like, that's not the right answer, but it's
Mhm.
like becoming a learner of all things. And so children are very involved. It's about habit formation. It's about family. It's just very, to me, it's a whole worldview,
Yeah.
in
I was gonna
itself.
say,
And
I
so
was
it's like,
thinking like this is like a whole chronema in itself.
yes, it is. It
Yeah.
is. So but it's also it's not the same sort of academic rigor, right? So it's not like, oh, you have to know how to read by 5. Like
Okay.
Charlotte Mason actually encourages reading later. So like I think around 6 is when they introduce letters, which makes people very uncomfortable, because we push early literacy in our
Yeah, I've been already
culture very
showing my 2-year-old. I'm probably stressing her out.
no, no, it's okay. I mean, children are it's about following their curiosity as well. So some children are just more inclined and interested and some are not. And
Yeah.
so I've had to reevaluate those things too. So but it's beautiful. I love it. I feel very free in Charlotte Mason, and I feel like there's still so much to learn. So we're a part of a co-op at Charlotte Mason as well, and so we connect with other moms. I'm learning a lot from them. So it's still evolving, but yeah, so we
Yeah.
use the good and the beautiful. We use there's a couple of curriculums that I've picked up, so I'll just mention some of their names. So Beautiful Feet is another one that we've used for history and cultural studies. We've used Treehouse Schoolhouse. She's a Instagram or online creator, but she comes up with these beautiful nature studies that we use. So it
Mhm.
covers all of the subjects. We've used recently little, I'm going to mess it up, I think it's like Little Schoolhouse. I can't remember now. Maybe I'll type them out to you. But
Okay.
she does
I'll
some
link
fun
them
history.
in the
Yeah.
show notes and description.
Yes, she does some really fun, like, unit studies. So we just did the Vikings, and now we're doing early American history through that. So, but yeah, you can't do everything at the same time necessarily. It's not like we're just covering this every day.
Mhm.
These things are oftentimes like we'll do. a nature study like once a week, and then we go on a hike once a week. And, we do things like weekly and they get covered. Um, but like math and reading and writing, those things are a daily practice. And like I would add like music, we're adding typing now. My daughter's old enough, she's practicing typing. So there's, little things that they can add as they get older and they're more independent and can do those things without you.
Yeah.
So that's how you grow your capacity. So
And is this like a curriculum you buy one time and then you just have access to it forever? Is that how it works?
yes,
Okay.
typically. The Good and the Beautiful, you buy it every year. But the other ones, I buy them, they're digital products. I print them and I have them saved on a drive in my folder so
Uh-huh.
that we can revisit them. Nature studies, we have the 4 seasons and we revisit them. But there's so much there that we just pick and choose different subjects to cover. Um, and so, like, if last year we didn't cover, the bird study, now we're going to do it this year. Last year we did mushrooms. This year we're going to do apples, or
Yeah.
depending on the season. So it keeps it fresh. But I've repeated the material. So when we come back around to it, my younger kids are like, this is all new to them. And my older kids are learning about it in a deeper capacity
Yeah.
because they have more capacity to learn and grow. And so that's what I like about family style learning is we're learning from each other. And
Mhm.
also it's like our favorite part of the day. My daughter just the other day told me we did a Valentine's unit. It was like American Girl historical version of Valentine's Day, the early Valentine's Day. And my daughter was like, I love being homeschooled. So part of
Mhm.
it is I ask them, like, what are you interested in? And so
Yeah.
I like to hear from them as well. And so if they're interested in something, we'll do that. Now, I will say I'm not a purist Charlotte Mason mom because Charlotte Mason she doesn't necessarily promote like unit studies like I do, but
Okay.
it's about working with how you are as a mom, what motivates you as a mom. Because I think if you as a mom are not inspired or you're not motivated, it can often feel like a list of tasks. There are times, like I remember after having my fourth, it felt like I was just a glorified tutor. I just sat there and just like had to do the math and and it just
Yeah.
sucks all the joy out of it. And so when you're in a season of sort of just surviving or transitioning in your family, we boil it down to very basics. And then once the sunshine comes out a little bit, you add a little bit more. And that's where the delight is the delight in learning. You want to foster that in your kids, not necessarily a checklist of things that you have to know before you graduate high school or whatever. It's more than that. We want them to love learning and be thirsty and hungry for those things.
Yeah, I love that. And so, like, when you give birth, maybe it'll be a different season for
Right.
some time.
Yes.
Like, you'll just take it more easy, right? Like, a little bit less in that
Exactly.
season.
Yes, exactly. We pause like our family unit studies, but they're going to keep going with their other lessons. My in-laws are here for a month, and my mother-in-law is a retired teacher. And so even
Oh,
today we did it
perfect.
together. She was kind of observing me and jumped in, and we got done way quicker because she was able to work with one while I was working with one, and my father-in-law is entertaining the boys, and so it worked out really well. So they'll be here for the month. That'll help us transition so that I don't have the brunt of it, and then when they leave, we'll pick it up again. But it's every new child that you add to your family is an adjustment for everybody. I heard from another seasoned mom when I only had one. I thought, I don't know how you do this. You've got six, and I've got one, and I feel like I
Mhm.
can barely do anything with just one.
Yeah.
And she says every new child is about a 6 month to 1 year adjustment in her house. And I remember her saying that, and it gave me permission to be like, oh wow, okay, I didn't realize it's hard for everybody. It's like not in a negative way, but we're adjusting. There's a new person, there's a new dynamic here, and so there's a lot of grace that comes with that as well.
Yeah, and I know we're running out of time. I'm like,
Yeah,
what are the most
that's okay.
important things I
Yeah,
can ask you? Um, this was my question.
yeah,
Someone asked this, and I thought it was very relatable and funny. They're like,
yes.
"How do you manage to do everything. Like you're full-time mom, priest wife, you make content, you partner with Patristic Nectar on the YouTube channel. Like, when do you make the time to do these things and be online and give in that way?
Right. Yeah, that's a good question. I don't do it all. That's why I laugh. Um, I definitely don't if I give the illusion. I don't. I know that, we all have, I joke that we all have a certain amount size plate
Yeah.
that God has given us. And so some people's plates are bigger and some people's plates are smaller. And so like recognizing how big your plate is very important.
Yeah, that's
You have a
good.
certain size plate. And there are times where your plate is so full and things are falling off and you really got to evaluate, okay, what is the most important thing? And so I would say too, this is where my husband comes in. He's much more practical than I am. I am a idealist in the sense of like I think I could do far more than I can, and he's always kind of bringing me back and just being like, I don't know if that's reasonable.
Yeah.
And so he really helps me balance these things. But um, yeah, I think again, I kind of described it earlier about it just being life. We live the life of the church. I take care of my home. It's about prioritizing what's most important. And so social media is certainly very low on the importance list in my life. And it does drop off at times. You'll probably notice that it'll just be like radio silence or, whatever. My kids are sick. And so it's like when my kids are sick, everything kind of extra gets dropped
Yeah.
off. And I have to be attentive to the one thing needful in front of me. But I also find as a mom that I need a creative outlet and I need something that is sort of mine in the sense of like I get to put some work into this, some effort into this, and it feels fruitful. It feels like I'm giving back with all of the beautiful blessings that have been given to me. And so um, you do make time for those things when you can, because whatever that looks like for you, right? It's like you don't have to be a content creator, but I find content creation is much more enjoyable than content consumption.
Oh my gosh.
Um,
Same.
so
I don't
it's,
consume, but I love to create.
yes, exactly. So I think, it's a good balance for me. I enjoy doing it. It's very fulfilling.
I wanted to share, I saw this really funny reel. It was a few weeks ago, and it was this mom, and she's driving, and it was like, people always ask me, how do I do it all? And she goes, well, I don't. I just choose what I'm going to fail at in each season.
That's hilarious. Yes.
Yeah.
I've
Which,
heard similar sentiment too. Like, especially as a homeschool mom, there's three basic tasks you have to do. It's like cooking, cleaning, and education. Pick two because you're not going to do all three every day.
right.
And I find that that's kind of the case. Um, it's, if you're really into homeschooling, sometimes that home cook life, I don't make bread from scratch and all of
Yeah.
these things, we keep things very simple. So you just have to prioritize what you're doing that day. And not everything gets done every day, but that's not necessarily what's most important either. So, but I
Yeah.
like having a creative outlet. And social media is that for me. Um, I like to share and encourage, and it comes from a place of just desiring to give back what has been given to me, and so trying, being a adult convert to Orthodoxy, I found that there was, when I was converting to Orthodoxy, it was a very different landscape online. There really wasn't much out there. There were a lot of blogs and things like written forms, but there wasn't
Mhm.
anything social media like. And so when my husband went to seminary, that's when I started sharing Orthodox content because we had
Mm,
been Orthodox for about 5 years. And I was like, I don't think I can teach anything about this, but at least I can just share my experience. And so that's
yeah.
kind of where it started, just sharing my own experience with it and how I came to, these things. And obviously, motherhood is very much a part of my life. I have small children. And so I like to encourage moms in that season of like, hey, I was just like you. I figured it out. And by talking to other moms. So that's what
Yeah.
I'm hoping to do.
Many of you ask me where to buy Orthodox Christian icons, so I wanted to take a moment to tell you about Orthodox Icons Corona. This is an Etsy shop that runs in conjunction with the Orthodox Church of the Blessed Virgin Mary in Corona, California. They have over 100 stunning icons that are handmade on plaques of wood with high-quality printed images. This is a humble shop run by the church's volunteer parishioners and a great option to consider for your next Orthodox icon. And you mentioned something when I asked you about curriculum. You were like, for the
Yeah.
saints or for like the homeschool?
Mm.
So I do want to ask you, like, do you have something like that for teaching them the faith as well?
I don't yet. So
Yeah.
I do my own. But I have a lot of Google Drives of ideas that I've put together over the years of what I'm doing. I just haven't been able to produce it in something as a curriculum, but that is one of my goals.
Yeah.
I have a few people that I'm working with behind the scenes when we have capacity, but I'd like to create a curriculum, sort of a morning time curriculum of like how we introduce the lives of the saints, what materials we use, and how we go about that, and the feast day content as well. I have a lot of that available on my blog, and it's free, and that's what it's there for. So I look at my blog as like my book draft one day. That's what I
Yeah.
would love to do is write a book. But right now I am in a season of growing children and educating them, and I just cannot find the time
Yeah.
to add anything more to that. So
Yeah, that's amazing. I relate so much, and that's really cool to know. I'm gonna check out your blog, and um, it's cool to know, like, that's, like, your book draft, and that one day it's
yes,
like, yeah, the scripture, there's a time and season for everything under the
yes,
sun. I have to
yes,
remind myself that all the time as a mom who also has a lot of aspirations that, like,
yeah,
right now, Mila is my priority first and foremost.
yes,
So,
yes,
I love that. Um,
absolutely.
I wanna ask you about godly femininity. I
Okay.
wanna hear your perspective on that. There's a lot of women these days that are being fed this worldly message of female empowerment and, you know,
Mm,
you are a goddess and you are divine, and we've been doing this Occult to Orthodoxy series, that
yeah.
this episode is actually airing in the middle of, and I'm just curious sort of what is your take on godly femininity in
Mm,
contrast, and why is that the better path for women?
interesting. It's a good question. I have a lot of thoughts on this topic, but I think that in my coming to Orthodoxy, it was very much a step of humility and trying to understand who it is that God has created me to be, sort of silencing the noise of our culture, of what our culture tells me I'm supposed to be. But what does God want from me? And I think I really started to wrestle with these things when I became a mother. I have two daughters, and I had to wrestle with, what am I teaching them about what it means to be a woman and growing up. And so I think the simplest answer is looking to the saints. So I think for me, it's been my growing relationship with the Theotokos that has really transformed my view of women. Um, and I do hear this sort of sentiment at times of, this sort of tension between men and women in the church, and, men can serve and women cannot. I hear about it, but that has never been anything in my experience at the church at all. In fact, I feel like maybe being an insider in the church, I'm like, I feel like the women run the church, but I mean,
Yeah.
my husband's the priest and he has the vision, but the women in particular, it feels like they do a lot of the work here. I don't feel that tension at all in
Yeah.
that way. So I see men and women as very much cooperating um, in the church, and both are equal in value, and maybe their roles are a little bit different. So I guess that tension isn't quite there. I don't feel less than or anything like that. I feel very much, I look at the icons in the church. It's like the Theotokos is like the largest icon in our church. It's like
Ours
it's
too.
her. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that doesn't. I remember being new to the faith and just staring at her. I would stand right in the front. I've always been a student. I sit in the front at church. I sit in the front. I just love to just be right in the front. And I had this one moment where I was sitting in the front of the church, staring at the icon of the Theotokos, and just thinking, she's so beautiful. She's so humble. She's like everything I want to be. Um, and I remember even just thinking about her attire and thinking like, I want to like emulate her more. I want to look more like her. And this is where my desire to start head covering also came from, is just in my, uh, I was Orthodox, I think, for about 3 years at this point. And it wasn't necessarily the practice of our parish that all women cover their heads. And so it came to the point where I was like, I think I'm gonna look into that more. Why do women wear their head coverings? And all the saints here, I think, with the exception of Saint Mary of Egypt, they all have head coverings. And
Oh,
so
that's
what
so
is that?
true. Yeah.
Yeah, I think she might be the exception, but um, what is that about? And so it caused me to start looking into the scriptures that were written about it. Um, and I think ultimately it just came down to I just want to be like her. I want to copy her. I think embracing femininity has been trying to rediscover who it is that God has called me to be. And I think a lot of that is just becoming a Christian and what that looks like. It I don't know that it's not a very easy answer for me, because it's just I look to the saints.
Yeah.
There's godly examples that I feel like I can follow by just emulating the humility you find in the saints. And I think if we approach things in a sense of humility and not pride of like trying to grasp for something that's not ours, then we find ourselves in a pretty like simplicity. It comes down to simplicity of, you know, it's not going to look like an aesthetic or anything like that. It's just your expression and your piety is something that is worked out between you and God. And it's not something for us to judge on the outside. I do, of course, think that the way that we present ourselves is important. But I feel like for every woman, it's a different part of our journey where we kind of wake up to certain things because we've been raised in a culture and different backgrounds and different families. My family growing up was very feminist.
Mm.
And I didn't necessarily have any strong feelings about that. But interestingly enough, even as a kid, I was like, I want to be a stay-at-home mom. And that was highly discouraged in my house. It was like, well, you could be a mom and something. Um, and so I had to sort of wrestle with that too, going into adulthood of like, what does this look like for me? Um, is being a mom a job, or is it like a role? There is a lot of things I've had to work through, but I certainly see the value in um, being home and raising my family and creating a safe haven for us. But I also, I have also worked and done both. So it's not like they're
Yeah.
incompatible. They certainly are, but it's whatever that plate that God has given us and how
Yeah.
much we can put on it and however we need to support our families and what that looks like is going to be different for everybody. So yeah, it's a big question. I'm just kind of I'm bouncing all over the place. So
No, I love how you explained it. And when you started with answering about the Theotokos, it just made me think like her image stands in such contrast to the image of what the world portrays as empowering, and how oftentimes the messaging women receive in the world and culture and New Age spirituality is actually very exploitative to them
yes.
and harmful
Yeah.
to them, and they don't realize it because they think this is what's empowering, but and that
Yeah.
the Christian way is suppressing, like, oh, you have to cover all this and wear all this and do all, but it's not that. Like, when you know God's love for you, you know that, like, the image of Mother Mary, the Theotokos, and her veiling, and
Yeah.
she's just held in such dignity, and just like this cherished, beautiful,
Yeah.
protected, not the exploitativeness of the world towards women, if that
Yes.
kind of makes sense. I
Yes.
see that contrast.
Yes. Absolutely. I would
Yeah.
agree.
Okay, last question, I promise.
That's fine.
Great Lent is upon us.
Yes. Yes.
Um, so what are some of the things, or like what is your mindset going into it, or like big ways you prepare, or maybe other things you fast from besides for just food during this time?
As like a pregnant, about to have a
Oh
baby.
my gosh.
Well,
Yeah, exactly. That too.
it's going to look very different for me personally this year.
Yes.
But I just actually recorded a video with Patristic Nectar about bringing kids to church and services um, during Lent, and I have another Lent video I can link to about
Okay.
like just preparing for a Lent as a family. So there's more content in that regard, but sort of my view of approaching Lent is we're going to make some changes. This is a time where we're going to try to pare down our schedule. We're going to try to focus in on what the church is offering us because it's about a
Mhm.
40-day, it's a little bit longer than that, but a 40-day, uh, basically like a boot camp for us to reorient ourselves and live the Christian life as God intended for us to do. And so it's a really cool opportunity for everybody, including families, to pay attention to that. You know, one thing I will say is if you are just attending services Sundays, you're going to miss a lot of um, Lent during that time
Yeah.
because you'll see a lot of the changes, especially during the week. So I always encourage people to go to the weekday services, at least one of them. You know, there's different services throughout the week and they're all different. And so try to make it to each of those so you can see what the church is offering during those times. They're some of the best. I'm a little sad to be missing most of it due right now, which is the first week of Lent next week. I thought
Wow.
it's going to be different. We'll be at home having our own Lenten thing, but my children will be going to services. So yeah, to prepare, I would just say take it seriously, try to fast and try to, add more prayers to your life. And that includes corporate prayers, going to the services, and just give a good effort, is what I always try to. You're never going to regret putting effort into it, but also setting realistic expectations. So I still use that word simplicity as much as possible. We're not trying to become vegan chefs. We're just trying to follow the rule and be simple.
Okay.
Um, and so as much as you could do that, do that. I think that the Christian life is humility and simplicity. And as much as we can just take what the church is offering us, then we'll benefit
Yeah.
from it. And we'll get to Pascha. And I love the homily at Pascha of St. John Chrysostom because he says, if you've entered at this hour, even in the 11th hour, come, feast. And
Yeah.
even as a priest's wife who is, I participated in a lot of Lent, I still feel like I'm the 11th hour club. I still
Yeah.
feel like there's so much that I missed and I'm just going to I'm invited to the feast and we
Yeah.
all get to join in for the Paschal resurrection. And it's just so joyful. And it's a community effort. The whole thing is communal together. And so, yeah, I guess I try to frame it in that way. It's not necessarily in my world, it's not taking away stuff, it's adding. I'm adding
Mhm.
more to my plate during Lent joyfully because
Joyfully.
I know that it's for our salvation, it's for our good. And so I have a couple of tips I recorded for Patristic Nectar of how we make that joyful in our home because I want my kids to also love Lent. And so I feel like we kind of set the tone for them to say, like, they're
Yeah.
watching us, so it's like, oh, I have to fast. It's like, that's not the spirit of fasting. The
Right.
spirit of fasting is like we give it up joyfully for God and we recognize that it's not us that saves us. We eat the apple and we think that that's going to save us. No, it's obviously the opposite. Like we try to take what's not ours for now and it has a detrimental effect. So just try to follow Christ. When you mess up, you pick yourself up and you continue on, and we have a repentant spirit during Lent too. So it's
Yeah.
good. It's a wonderful time. It's also a good time to like pare down, social media in general. I think it's a good time. I encourage people to do that too, because we're just trying to silence all that extra
Yeah.
noise so we can be attentive.
That's wonderful advice. So we all need to go watch that video on Patristic Nectar family. So
Yes.
I'll be sure to do that. Thank you so
Me too.
much for taking the
Yes.
time and being with us here today. I've loved this conversation.
Thank you for
Um,
having me.
yes, absolutely. Can you share, so we know Patristic Nectar family, people can find you. Where else can people
Yes.
find you?
So I'm on Instagram, Ascetic Life of Motherhood, and I think on Facebook it's similar, Ascetic Life of Motherhood blog. And then I also have my own website, which is Ascetic Life of Motherhood, and that's sort of been it's like my book draft of all of the work I've put into feast day content, monthly ways of connecting monthly. I have some reflections, but it's a resource for people to look at. So a lot of the content on social media gets buried and it's hard to find. So that's my
Yeah.
attempt of making something more permanent and searchable. So asceticlifeofmotherhood.com.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Thank you guys so much for listening today. If you enjoyed this episode, please support the channel by giving us a big thumbs up, leaving a comment or review, or sharing it with a friend. Stay tuned for the next episode, which is part 5 of the Occult to Orthodoxy series, covering tarot, oracle, and angel cards and the Orthodox Christian perspective on them. I can't wait to see you guys then. Until next time.